Welcome to Autism Knows No Borders, a podcast where people connected to autism inspire change and build community. Together with the Global Autism Project, I'm your host, Rachel Harmon, a professional with over a decade of experience in the field of autism services, outreach, and advocacy. This episode is part 2 of my conversation with pioneering autism advocate and internationally recognized leader in animal handling innovations, Dr. Temple Grandin. It was originally released on December 15, 2022. In this episode, we discuss how parents can encourage the development of skills in visual thinkers, life skills and executive functioning, graphic novels, how to solve the world's biggest problems, and Dr. Grandin's advice for other visual thinkers. In this episode, discover what's possible when all minds are put to use. And now, I present you Dr. Temple Grandin. So, for parents, what's a way that they can encourage these kinds of strengths in children who are visual thinkers?
Well, my mother always encouraged my ability in art. And I would just draw the same horse head over and over again. Mother said, let's draw the whole horse. Let's draw the stable. She said, well, let's use paint instead of pencil. She was just broadening it, encouraging but broadening my art skill.
Yeah.
The way I used to sell jobs is I would just show people my drawings. When you're weird, what you got to do is learn to sell your work. And when I showed my drawings off, people were impressed. That's how I sold the jobs. A lot of people that are on the autism spectrum that are very successful have their own businesses. They either have their own businesses, ranging from small to very large, or they kind of find a niche within a company, like being the resident electrical genius, for example. And where they get into trouble is when bosses change. That can be a big problem for somebody on the spectrum, especially an older person who's been in a job for many years and get a new boss.
Right.
I can't remember long strings of verbal information. So they go, blah, 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 blah. This is what they want me to design. I can't remember that. I got to write it down. Pilot to checklist. I have no verbal sequencing memory. Got to write it down. And there was a sad story where a guy who built fencing, this happened just last year, got fired when they got a new boss. The boss goes, blah, 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 and he built the fence wrong and got fired. If he'd just been allowed to write down, okay, you built this, then it would have been fine. Like 3 minutes to write it down in the morning. All I would have needed to do.
But he didn't think to ask for it either?
Well, I don't know. He got fired. It was a real mess.
Okay.
And this is where I've seen sad situations where they get fired. The other thing on these shops is the really creative autistic guy has to have somebody to run the business. In several instances, it's been the spouse, or they hired somebody to run the business. Once the shop gets more than like 2 or 3 people, they're going to need help on the business end of it.
Do you think that's related to challenges with executive functioning?
Well, let me throw that term around. It depends how you define executive functioning.
How do you define it?
Well, I can't process or remember those long strings of verbal information. Now, I like to use a calendar where I can see my whole schedule for the week. So when I'm making plane reservations, for example, I'm going, I'm flying east. I got to have a whole day before the event for travel. Flying the other way, I can take a 6 o'clock plane and get home. You see, and then I like looking at the whole month and I can see, fly east. I take a 10 o'clock flight out of Denver. It gets to most eastern locations by 3:30 or 4. And I have to have room on the calendar to do that.
Yeah. How about your day-to-day time management?
Now, I'm usually pretty good on that. But I think part of it is kids are not being taught social skills in the same structured way. They aren't being taught things like shopping, budgeting. A lot of life skills that I just took for granted are not being taught. I'm appalled at the number of teenagers with an autism label, fully verbal, who have never gone in a store and bought something by themselves. I was taught saving money when I was 8 years old, along with every other kid in the neighborhood. And I got 50 cents a week for allowance. And there were certain things mother considered were allowance items. Candy bars, comics, little toy airplanes. She never bought those things. 50 cents a week? 5 Superman comics. But if I wanted a 69-cent airplane, I had to save for 2 weeks. And I'm realizing now just how important that was in teaching me skills.
Yeah, it's important, these life skills.
Now it's a $5 airplane.
Yeah.
And it's a worse airplane than the one we had in the 50s.
Mm. So speaking of comics, do you gravitate more towards like picture books because of the way you think?
I loved comics, but I don't really like these graphic novels because I don't like the switching back and forth between the picture and the text. See, if the book's got pictures in it, I like to look at the pictures. Okay, like this morning I was reading articles in Science, and I look at all the graphs really carefully, and I take in the graphs, and then I read the text. I don't switch back and forth that much.
Okay.
I tend to look at the graphs first. But in some of those graphic novels, I got to do so much switching back and forth. I don't like that.
Okay, that makes sense.
I'd rather just read the text or just give me drawings for something. I'll look at it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So going back to this idea of how visual thinkers can solve problems, what do you think are some of the biggest problems of the world? And this is a big question right now in the 21st century. And how can visual thinkers contribute to solving them?
My approach to problem solving is to look at things more targeted. Let's look at my cattle handling work. Okay, people say, how do we just treat animals more humanely?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I picked out something that's relatively specific. Cattle handling. That's not everything. That's something specific. And I would design a piece of equipment, and then I wrote about how to design it. Writing was really important. I would just write how-to articles on how to design stuff. I also learned that selling equipment is much easier than getting people to operate it correctly. It took me about 10 years to learn that. But it's something targeted. And it's not everything. Like I have a lot of students say, well, I want to work on social justice. I said, let's pick out something more targeted, like maybe using DNA evidence to show that this particular prisoner did not commit the crime. But that's something specific. You see, that's also something much more doable. You're doing something very specific.
Yeah. Like right now, there's this threat of climate change, which is very big still. What are your ideas to get specific with that?
Well, you have to pick out something that you can actually work on. And right now, you've got a lot of investors like covering fields up with solar panels. I'd like to see some sheep grazing under that. We have 1,000 acres. Well, that's a huge amount of land covered up with solar panels with no sheep under it. I don't think that's very good. And the other thing that worries me, have they figured out the maintenance on this system? Okay, you get in there, you get a tax break, you build all the solar panels, you're going to maintain it, the wiring and stuff on that? There's maintenance.
Right.
And who are you going to need to fix that stuff? People that flunked algebra.
Okay.
That's who you need to fix it. And I wouldn't be bothered with the tilting mechanisms for the solar panels. Just mount them solid. The tilting mechanisms break. I don't know how many times I've seen the solar panels all this way.
Yeah.
And I noticed that our airport for a long time had that problem. Every time I drove in there, it annoyed me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But picking out something specific. I was just yesterday talking to Texas science teachers meeting, and they had a horrible thing where all these power plants got frozen and they couldn't work, and then the electricity grid went down. See, my approach to that, I would like to know if I'm going to make policy about this, what froze? What exact thing froze at each one of those power stations? You turn me loose 3 hours in each one, I'll go down to a maintenance shop and they'll tell me. And I know enough about equipment that they can't tell me. Maintenance people aren't going to tell me about BS. And I would rank them from easy to fix to most difficult to fix. And then let's discuss it. Okay, like a frozen turbine hull, that's probably easy to fix. Distributed gas wells all froze up, that's a mess to fix. But when they talked about what they're going to do about it, everybody's just running around crazy, but nobody's discussing what froze each one of these stations. You froze the coal-fired power plant? Probably has something to do with the coal intake, which works like a grain elevator on super heavy duty. Yeah, well, no, that one's probably easier to fix. 100 people died in that mess.
Wow.
Yeah, that's really serious. But nobody talked about it where they actually talked specifically what these plants froze, what froze in each station. And then once you know that, which ones will be easy to winterize and which ones might be almost impossible to winterize.
So is it kind of like with the way that your brain works, you're scanning over the whole power plant looking for exactly where the problem was, trying to get more zoned
Well, I'm
in?
going to go, I can tell you, I see the power plant. We have a coal fired power plant. And I've been on the property there because my student raised bison there. I'm now seeing a security guard house. I'm going to walk in that plant, go straight to the maintenance shop.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll tell me. As long as I protect them from being fired, they will tell me. That's the first thing I'm going to do. Straight to the maintenance shop. And I don't want anybody with me because if there's any suits around, they won't talk.
Mm-hmm.
And then, okay, now take me out, show me the thing that froze. I know enough about equipment. I'm not going to get into something, get electrocuted or anything like that. Or fall into something. What was the thing that froze? And then we discuss how to fix it. And then you could start making rational decisions. Okay, now let's say I could fix half of those stations. With half the stations on that grid, can I at least do scheduled rolling blackouts on a schedule? That's not ideal, but it's better than having it totally off.
Right.
Okay, now mathematicians, I don't know how to balance a power grid. Okay, mathematicians, if I get half of these stations working, keep them working, can I at least do some decent scheduled rolling blackouts? Okay, mathematicians, tell me. I can't balance a power grid, but I'd be very good at finding out what exactly froze at each station and very good at estimating the expense to winterize it. You see, but that's specific.
Uh-huh.
That's specific.
Temple, I want to tie this back into what you were talking about earlier with the need for more hands-on workshops in school so that kids can learn how to use tools and build things and solve problems from that angle. So again, this is like a big problem. Like if you look at the school system, the education system as a whole, how can we get specific to solve the problem?
Some schools are putting it back in, like Minnesota right now is thinking about following the Dutch model of university route and a tech route. But there's a tendency to think, well, we just put the stupid kids into shop. I can tell you right now, the people I worked with that have patented mechanical equipment, it's a different kind of thinking. Now,
Right.
one of the things that motivated me in my 20s to do the projects that were shown in the movie, I wanted to prove it wasn't stupid. A lot of people thought it was stupid.
Mm-hmm. So then if the goal is to increase the number of classes that are offered in each school, where does it start? Does it start with the parents asking for it or awareness on the administration to know that this is even a problem?
I get asked this all the time. I can tell you, you fix one school at a time.
Okay.
And then you need to be looking at, it's going to be long term, looking at where students are 10 years after high school. I can think of all kinds of places I don't want them. And then you write about how you did it. Writing was a really important part of my career because I wrote about how to build cattle handling facilities, the behavior of cattle. I wrote about that. Just how-to articles. There's a lot of creative stuff being done with teaching, and none of it's written about. Now, you see, I don't think in generalities. I'm bottom up. So I'm thinking a specific example where I went to a book talk, and it's for a book distributing company, and there was a teacher that did really, really creative stuff on teaching kids about Egypt and about history. And I said, your talk needs to be on YouTube. Well, that never got done. And it needs to be on YouTube with enough keywords so that people will find it.
Right. Then it serves as a model for other people.
Well, that's right. And there's a lot of really creative people doing stuff and nothing's written up or nothing's videoed in a format that people could access. I found that in autism treatment. There was a lady named Lorna King. She was a really a pioneer in occupational therapy and a sensory-based therapy methods. She has one paper, and I was a co-author on it and wrote most of the paper on her research, and she's first author.
Mm-hmm.
But she did all this wonderful pioneering work. You can't is nothing was written up except this one paper. And I kept pushing them. We've got to get some of this stuff written up just on how to do sensory therapy. This is back in the 70s.
Well, I think also there's, a new way of sharing information now, like with podcasts, like with what we're doing.
Well, that's right. Well, and that wasn't available. And I think Lorna King would have done a podcast. See, but that wasn't available.
Mm-hmm.
Video cameras are big, gigantic, huge things. And there was no way of doing that. Yeah, because we could have done podcasts of her talks.
Mm-hmm.
But when she was doing most of her talks, videoing was pretty cumbersome.
Yeah. All right, Temple, I'd like to close with one last question. What advice would you give to any visual thinkers out there, whether they're autistic or not?
Try lots of different things. See what you're good at doing. Now, remember, there's two kinds of visual thinkers. There's object visualizers like me, who think in pictures. We're good at art, animals, mechanical things, and photography. And then there's the more mathematical, visual spatial, computer programming, higher mathematics, and try lots of different things. I'm going to recommend to parents, if you have a kid that's good at math, move them ahead. Maybe your 10-year-old needs to take high school math. Let them do it. The visual thinkers like me, we need to be using tools and building things, making mechanical things. You can start with some of the Lego mechanical things, but some of that stuff gets kind of expensive. We just had old wooden stuff and made things out of it. And when I was in second grade, I was using tools, pliers, hammer, and screwdriver to make little crossbars on my parachutes. And that project's in this Calling All Minds book, which is my childhood projects.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember my little kid's hand wasn't strong enough to cut a coat hanger wire, but I could dent it, and then I had to go like this.
Yeah.
I remember doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But kids aren't doing those things where they just tinker around, and that's where visual thinkers really thrive.
Yeah. And I think as adults too, you can still tap into some unknown strengths that you might have. Like I just started doing painting a couple of years ago, and I realized, wow, I'm actually pretty decent at it. So I've continued taking classes, but it's something that I never really threw myself into as a kid. So I just want to add to that as adults can continue to learn.
Well, that's
too.
right. I didn't come from an ag background, so how did I end up in the cattle industry? I ended up in the cattle industry because I was exposed to it as a teenager. It's that simple.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big believer in exposure. And then if you're going to go into professionally, then mentoring. But I can remember people I worked with that started as tiny shops. And a contractor named Jim Uhl had seen my drawings, and he had like a 2-person construction company, steel and concrete work. Tiny little tiny shop. Eventually grew into a huge big construction business. He seeked me out to sell jobs and design jobs. And I watched other companies start out really small and grow. What's happening today, the small shops are not forming for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Like right now, I was out in Nebraska, there's a big feedlot out in Nebraska. They can't find anybody to repair their mill.
That's a problem.
That's this September. That's a problem.
Yeah. Well, I hope your book brings, some inspiration to people to actually make some change in this.
Thing is, I'm really concerned about the skill loss. And then I spent hours online looking stuff up, finding more examples of this. And I'm a big believer, expose kids to lots of different things. And, some people say, well, everyone should go to college. There's one place where you don't need college. High-end skilled trades. I'm not talking about roofing and floor tiles. I'm talking about the high-end stuff. Inventing equipment, heating and air conditioning, electricians, plumbers, the welders who invent things and patent it. I mean, some of these people that I worked with that I know are autistic and stutterers, they have 20 patents. They're selling their specialized equipment around the world, and they started out in their backyard because they took a welding class in high school. That was the beginning of it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Just got to expose them.
They've got to get exposed to stuff.
Yeah. And even thinking about the future of AI and using machines.
You got to remember all of this stuff you're talking about, mechanical devices controlled by computers. Somebody has to repair all this stuff. Yeah, we're not thinking enough about that.
Mm-hmm. All right, Temple. Well, thank you so much for for coming on the show again. I'm going to put a link to your new book in our show notes so people can go check that out.
Okay, well, thank you so much. No, we need to get this out there because visual thinkers are good at thinking of more specific things to work on, like on energy and things like that. Well, let's take the wind turbines. We just had one where the whole top fell off in Colorado. It was not being maintained. It was 20 years old. Never had a drop of maintenance.
Wow.
That's awful.
Yeah.
We need our visual thinkers in the future to find practical solutions to problems. Verbal thinkers are too top-down, too generalized.
Mm-hmm.
I get asked, what can I do to fix schools? Let's fix one school at a time and then write about how you did it. And how did these students have better careers when we did this? That's something specific. But I did lots of writing just on how to do stuff.
Yeah, make it accessible for other people. That's how progress happens, right? People learn from other people's ideas and they build on them.
Well, that's right. And we've got things, and we need all the different kinds of minds to solve problems. You need the mathematical thinkers, you need the picture thinkers like me, and we need the verbal thinkers too.
Mm-hmm.
All the different kinds of minds need to work together, and they have complementary skills. And I discuss that in detail in my book on visual thinking. And in the future, we need to figure out how to solve problems. So if we're working on something like, renewable energy, pick out something specific that you can actually work on, make it successful, and then write about how you did it.
Yeah. Great.
All right. Thank you very, very much. Great to talk to you.
Thanks for tuning in to Autism Knows No Borders. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with one person who you think will find value in it too. By doing so, you'll be helping our mission to improve access to autism services around the world. Thanks for listening. Take care.